All the Romance languages come from Latin, but then why are they different languages? Why is Portuguese different from Romanian? Why can't a Catalan perfectly understand Sardinian from zero? Well, in answering that, we can invoke a whole variety of factors. Firstly, Latin itself wasn't one single unified language spoken exactly the same way across the Roman Empire. And over time, as Latin, what we would perhaps call classical Latin, evolved into the modern Romance languages, a whole innumerable number of influences have distinguished the different tongues from each other. Phonological shifts, influence from other languages, perhaps even geographical factors. And what I find particularly interesting now is how Spanish and Italian adopted two different strategies to resolve perhaps what we might consider a pronunciation challenge in original Latin. And that's what I want to talk about today. So if you know a little bit about Latin, but even if you just speak English or understand English, you'll know that Latin had this tendency to juxtapose two different consonants, one occlusive and one aspirated. This appears in words like obtenere, factum. And if you just pronounce those, you can realize they're pretty tricky to actually say. They don't exactly follow the path of least resistance. And it's interesting to see that as modern Spanish and modern Italian developed, speakers of those languages adopted two separate strategies in order to deal with what we might consider this phonetic challenge. If you pardon the slightly imprecise linguistic terminology. And they are, respectively, assimilation, the Italian technique, and lenition, what we see more in Spanish. Assimilation, which we see a lot in Italian, is when one sound shifts to become more like the sound following it. And this we can see in the following examples. Latin factum has become fatto in Italian. Captivum, cattivo. Scriptum, scritto. Obtenere, ottenere. Lactem, latte. Please correct my Italian pronunciation in the comments below if you have any gripes with that. In all of these instances, those relatively difficult to pronounce clusters have become assimilated, they've become simplified in order to ease pronunciation, to make that more phonesthetic, perhaps. What you'll notice here is, in almost all of those cases, the speakers are trying to avoid following up an occlusive in which you kind of close the sound, you bring an end to a particular sound with an aspirated consonant. So, k to t, b to t, etc., etc. Now, that's the way Italian approached this problem, and that's actually why you see so much of this raddoppiamento, this doubling of consonants in Italian. It's all over the place. Spanish, however, doesn't actually have that much. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm just speaking off the top of my head here, the only examples of doubled consonants in Spanish are the famous double L and the double R, indicating a rolled R, like pizarro. There may be some others I'm forgetting right now, but I think those are the only examples that we have. Now, the technique Spanish speakers adopted to address this uncomfortable Latin consonant cluster is called lenition. It's when consonants soften, or perhaps in some cases drop away altogether. This is why in Spanish, for factum, we have hecho. The F to H transition in Spanish we made a video on already, so we'll leave that aside. What's important here is that the CT kt in factum has become ch. It's softened entirely. It's become sibilated, pronounced further forward to the front of the mouth entirely. But examples like captivum to the Spanish cautivo or scriptum to the Spanish escrito are examples in which that plosive p has disappeared entirely from the language. It's been simply ignored. Another example along the lines of factum is the fact that we don't say lacte in Spanish for milk, we say leche. The kt, again, has just become a ch. This is the sort of thing that endlessly fascinates me. If you have examples of how your language, especially if it's a Romance language, has dealt with a lot of these quite difficult Latin consonant clusters, I'm keen to hear more in the comments below. Because sometimes when we conceive of this and articulate it openly, we begin to learn a lot more about the deep phonetical mechanics of a lot of the languages that we love learning and speaking. So I'm going to say thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Adios and arrivederci.